All right, 1979, Edwin Torres was a Supreme Court judge. Well, one of the Supreme Court judges, and he wrote a book called Carlito's Way in 1977, I believe, and a sequel, which is called After Hours. It's a little confusing. The movie's based on the book After Hours. You can't use that title because Marty took it away in the mid-'80s with his successful movie called After Hours. So what
would be very different than After Hours.
Very different from After Hours. So... yes, and Edward Torres actually shared the same gym in New York City with Al Pacino, and they were good friends, and they knew each other and worked out, and Edwin always told him, eventually you were going to play Carlito in my book when they turn it into a movie. So it has been always foreseen since the mid-'70s all the way up to when the movie got made in 1992 that this was going to be made into a movie and starring Al Pacino.
And then we finally got it. And what's sad is that you get Pacino, who's so well known for these kinds of villainous characters in some way, and Carlito is very different than some of the other ones he's played, like Scarface or The Godfather. But they kind of get grouped in together.
Yeah.
And so many people kind of don't talk about Carlito's Way in the same way that they talk about Scarface or The Godfather. We officially are going to break it down today for you and decide if this is one of those films that deserves the upper echelon, the lower echelon, or somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. We'll find out
on film.
Which way it's going to go.
All right, welcome back to Kyle and Nick on Film. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. In the mid-'90s, Brian De Palma said he was tired of the gangster movies. He didn't want to do it anymore. And somebody, probably his agent, pitched him, he wanted to do Carlito's Way. And after I think two other directors were turned down, he was hesitant to do it. And eventually, when Al Pacino signed on, they were going to match up and do, which probably got a lot of reviews. It was probably a Scarface sequel. And this has got the comparison because they both worked together doing Scarface. It's the same kind of premise, but this is a little bit different avenue than Scarface.
Yeah, and what I appreciate about this film, this is the first time viewing for me. It's just always been one I've wanted to see. Is that Al Pacino is not playing a traditional gangster villain. You know, as I mentioned in our opening, like he does villainous things. He is a villainous kind of person in his former life. Yeah. But he's gotten out. He's newly freed now, and Carlito basically wants to shed all of the crime in his life and try to get himself straight, get a new environment, and basically start his life over again in a way that's not going to be as the bad guy. And it's funny that we almost relate this because a few years earlier he did The Godfather Part 3 with that notable line, "Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in." Yeah. That line applies even more so to this film.
And this is right after he won an Oscar for The Scent of a Woman, where he did a lot of extroverted, a lot of loud characters. And here, this is a movie where he's bringing it more, right? He's more emphasis of the screaming, more of the dramatic, and more of the really... a lot of what we see of Al Pacino now comes from this movie and Scent of the Woman, of this hoo-ha, this very puff-up kind of a stance.
Well, and starting the film, I had just looked at Al Pacino's filmography one more time and kind of paged through it before I began the film. So I love that in the opening, as he's being, in the jury area, they're saying, "All right, sir, you're not accepting an award," knowing that he just accepted an award. I really thought to myself, it's unfair, again, as I said earlier, it's unfair that it's compared to Scarface and that it's compared to The Godfather, because even though it is an Al Pacino crime gangster movie, it's a very different one. And it's meant to be a bit haunting, a bit, not brooding, haunting, but sad. It is tragic in a lot of ways that
the beginning of the movie tells you where it's going to go. This is the Brian De Palma, the beginning of the movie tells you, emphasis where it's going to go. I do like the beginning of the movie where he's being carried away on a stretcher, but he sees the billboard for Paradise. And that's so Brian De Palma. It's more Brian De Palma. I want to go there, right? It's always the emphasis. The theme of the movie is, can you escape your past and have a little more empathy for other people, even though you have built a reputation, and can you defeat it? Can you change? Eventually, then he meets up with Gail.
Yep. And
Gail's played by Penelope Ann Miller. Thank you. And both those characters are kind of disenfranchised. The world has kind of sold them out or something.
Yeah, they're not the people they wanted to be.
Yeah. Their aspirations and reality is kind of hit, and I like their Gail. She just blows right in his life. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have a past. I like that they they rekindle this romance, and she does constantly remind him of like, I know where this is headed, much in the same way as the audience. We don't have all the details, but we have enough to know that it's headed down a dark path, and we're hoping still that there can be some semblance of movement towards the good. And I think I like that she sets him up knowing like, this is how you are going to end. This is how it's going to happen. And she tells him in one scene much of the detail that we see in the opening of the film.
Yeah, I know their characters very match up very well, and it's very plausible. One of the first things Brian De Palma shot was the pool hall scene, where they interact with the shootout and everything. And here, Carlito gets stuck in the bathroom with an empty gun, and he's going to have to fake his way out of there. And I think that's a dramatic, okay, I'm reloaded, click, click, and I'm going to come out, and everybody, leave me alone. But I think it's a very great metaphor of the entire movie. He's constantly bluffing his whole way, kind of lying about what he's doing, and
I really appreciated that because the scene was actually criticized by studios for being too long, the pool hall scene. It happened so early in the film, and it feels very climactic almost.
Yeah.
And of course, knowing that we're like 20, 30 minutes into the movie, that like Carlito's probably going to be okay. We still got quite a bit of movie. Maybe that's their concern. For me, I felt like that scene is basically we telling you that the entire film is this scene. It is this option that he didn't want to go in. He didn't want to get involved. He does something as a favor because generally speaking, he owes a lot to people.
Yeah. And
in terms of what he personally favors, and he goes in and he just shouldn't have.
Right. And it's a lot of those steps of, I have to do this. I have alliances with a lot of people.
Yeah.
I have to do these things. The other thing is John Leguizamo.
Yeah.
Here, Brian De Palma said, you have to make up your character. I don't have any authority. So I think John Leguizamo turned down 3 times before Brian's like, no, you have creative freedom. Do whatever you want to this guy. And at the time, this was like John Leguizamo's breakout. This is like everybody.
That's why I feel like it's so crazy that he's pushing for him.
Yeah.
After 4 times of saying no, he goes back again and he gives him complete creative control. Yeah. I think that the character is one of the best in the movie. Don't get me wrong. It's just the insistence on getting him to play Benny Blanco is so crazy to me.
Yeah, and if you didn't know, I think the accolades were actually not so much of Sean Penn and Al Pacino, but when this movie came out in the 90s, was John Leguizamo's performance. Even though they get a lot of the awards came to Sean Penn and Penelope and Al, everybody was talking about John.
Yep, and it's because Benny Blanco's character keeps showing up at the least opportune time to mess with Carlito's traction. Yeah. Carlito is just starting to kind of get the wheels going so he can get moving. The whole the metaphor for the film is Al Pacino digging himself into a hole over and over again instead of just climbing out. And Benny Blanco is that reminder that every time he shows up, you almost forget that he's still in the story. Because he pops in and you're like, oh, this guy again. Yeah. But you still want to see him take part, even though you hate the character.
And I think, Carlito, Al Pacino's character hates him because he reminds him so much of what he was before. So there's almost like a disdain, but also an empathy. There's an opportunity that he could get rid of him completely and not have to deal with him ever again. But he's like, let him go. Yeah. And I think it's because he reminds him so much of himself, and maybe he can, his life will navigate to exactly the point where I am, which doesn't really happen.
Yeah, so there's almost the idea that if you were to make Carlito's way today, that you'd have the same actor who plays Carlito playing a de-aged Benny Blanco, because there's just that parallel that they're running through where he kind of doesn't try to push Benny out of his path in life because he knows that he can't do that. But what he instead does is he just tries not to get involved and just slowly finds himself getting involved. And that's kind of the same way with his relationship with Kleinfeld, played by Sean Penn. I adore Sean Penn when he plays kind of the smarmy, slimy guy as opposed to the tough guy. I don't think Sean Penn's tough guy is as strong as his slime ball.
Slime ball, and this is very much a slime ball. It's very well known that Brian De Palma and Sean Penn did not get along very much in the set. Sean Penn did a lot of psychological things to get certain takes. He's like, no, I don't have it. So they had to do multiple takes, even though Brian De Palma's like, no, let's move on. And Sean Penn's like, no, I want to keep doing this and do this. And because he was an agitated character, he wanted to be an agitator to everybody on the set. Even to Al Pacino, so and that's the way Sean Penn motivates. And when you get Sean Penn, that's what it's gonna do.
It takes some cojones to go after Al Pacino or Brian De Palma. Both those guys are just so big.
And Al's a pro. He knows if we're gonna do 20 takes on something, whatever.
Yeah. He's like, I'm still getting paid at the end of the day.
And Louis Guzman's in it. One of the best character actors from the 90s is Louis Guzman, and it's nice to see him come in here once in a while.
Yeah, he adds a little bit of flavor to every movie that he's in. And he's one of those guys that he can play comedic in a serious movie or can play serious in a comedic movie, and he just never feels like he's out of place.
No.
You know, in Boogie Nights, he kind of has a very similar role in that he's just kind of passing through both movies. He's not really too hinged on the plot, but he is just kind of there helping out, and the funny moments and the serious moments are just all interspersed with him, and he's always just very realistic.
I know. My favorite part is him being on the balcony and Yes Man.
Yeah.
I love that part. When I went to see the theater, it's like, it's Louis Guzman.
Yeah.
No, don't do it, man. You're awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the other. Brian De Palma liked to do lives of elaborate scenes of like one big space and do multiple cameras and just have a lot of depth to it. And I think that they want to do the climax at the Union Station or the World Trade Center.
Yeah, the original idea was the World Trade Center, which had just gone through its 90s bombing. Which, I mean, you've got to move it out of there. You can't obviously put an action sequence in there with people shooting guns. So it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So was the Union Station he ended up doing that in? Or?
Yeah, the trains, which is, I think it actually is better for the story because, like you said, they're like, nobody's going to look for us at the trains. Nobody uses trains anymore.
I think the finale for me was fantastic. And I mean like the finale being like the last 35 minutes of the movie, because once he realizes that he's got to get out tonight, that for me is the ending of the movie. And it's that great sequence he goes back to. Is it El Paraiso?
El Paraiso, which is the food stand Tony Montana had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, you gotta wonder, like, I'm sure that was intentional, but it's wonderful to see that sequence when he goes in there and he has to get the money out. And we get that single shot following him as he goes up there, as he goes down, as he gets involved with people, as people pull him out of the crowd and try to get in, and you know that some of them might not be the friendly ones, they might be the foes, they might be the fox, you know.
And that's how Brian De Palma films it. Is, you know, you have to, what is this character? So it's a lot of, you have to fill in the blanks.
Yep.
You know, is this going to happen this way? A lot of the suspense the whole way Brian De Palma.
Yeah, and I felt intensely like into the movie. That I did the whole movie, but like really that finale part where he realizes I've got to get the money, I've got to go get my girl, and we got to get out of here now. That part for me was like, it just ramped up all the tension for me, and I think that's one of the best executed finales I've ever seen in a movie. Barring a few like inconsistencies and plot moments, as we said, like that train sequence at the end where they, you know, there are cops, there are bad guys, and there's Carlito, and at one point we see the cops shoot a character, and then we see another instance of somebody getting shot, and the cops are in the same area.
Yeah,
no one
so
responds
like,
to it.
Love that fact,
I liked everything. There was moments when that inconsistency for me was like, oh, why would the cops? Where are the cops? Like, where are they at this point? Like, there's moments where that it didn't work 100%, but I think successfully enough where you feel tension with every move. It's a bunch of chess pieces, and it's all on this weird chessboard.
And I think that's where Brian De Palma is really a master at it, of two things going on at the same time in a film. So you have the cops up here, and you got what's going on here, and your eye can't follow it, and it makes it an enriching scene. I do like how they set up the environment, like the Sean Penn's office, where you have the windows, and you have like action going on, or his apartment, where you have the by the bridge. So Brian De Palma always works in depth, like how deep can we go this, and it is full with this movie. Yeah,
he's great at presenting you a lot of options on screen to look at.
That's
like things are just all happening on screen, but he's great at not making it nauseating, because there are times in a film where you can be presented with stuff and it's almost like, I don't want to say there's no director, because he's definitely directing you towards something, but there's so many options for things that are going on that you could be looking at on screen, but he never feels like making you lost. Like, you always know what's going on, and like the tension is you realizing like, I don't know what I'm supposed to look at, but you never feel nauseous from it.
Which is a great arrangement of how they set up the disco place, which is it's a very full, you can navigate, it's spectrum of colors and metals and arrangements and everything, and I think it's where Brian De Palma really succeeds in how to film those kind of environments of everybody dancing, and it feels like it's flowing. It doesn't really seem like it's nauseing or agitating, but it feels like it's just an ensemble.
Exactly, and of the time, character, you know, being set in, I think it was the 77, is it? Or the 70s? It feels like it could have been made in the 70s. I feel it feels like you are capturing a time period pretty strongly for film. I mean, I know the 70s were only 15 years before this movie came out, but it definitely worked for me with the time period. I didn't realize that it was going to be set in the past when I saw it, and I felt like lived in time.
This is actually, I believe, if I check my notes, this is Viggo Mortensen's first appearance on film. Am I right?
It's got. I think he might have done The Prophecy around this time too, but I think this might be like the first movie that came out with him in America.
Yeah.
He's almost unrecognizable in the movie. I only realized it was him when I saw Viggo's name at the beginning credits and was kind of waiting for him to show up. If I didn't know he was in the movie, I don't think I would have recognized him.
Right, you have to almost look for him and you're like, oh my god, that's him.
Yeah.
Because he's playing such a pathetic...
He's pathetic. He's many shades away from Aragorn. I'll just say that.
Many shades away from Eastern Promise.
Yeah, exactly. He is the weakest, most childish kind of character in the film. And one where...
No, even afraid to be like, that's pathetic.
Yeah, you don't even feel bad for him, but you feel this solemnness for people that get mixed up in this life.
And it's a barometer of how Carlito's going to treat him, right?
Yeah.
Is he going to kick him out and like, get out of here, grow up? Or is he going to say, or he'd be like Rick Bain from Casablanca, here's a couple bucks, get the hell out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
And I think that's
he's one of those what we call barometer characters.
That's what's so great about Carlito's Way to me is that, it's very much Carlito's movie. He is the star of the movie, but everything that happens in the film is a choice for Al Pacino's character. He is presented with choices the entire movie, and it's kind of like Uncut Gems, where he keeps making the bad call.
Right.
Where you're watching it, and you, it's better.
Even Gail's like, you don't
pause it, and you can get up and yell at the TV. Why?
Even Gail does that, like in front. You don't have to owe anybody. Go, leave. Right. Yeah.
And it's the question of, can you build a new life without at least finishing the problems that you started.
Yes.
And I think he's constantly faced with that throughout the film. And it's moments like with Viggo. It's more moments like with Sean Penn, especially that scene where Penn is calling in his favor, which is the most frustrating favor for a guy that got you out of jail to be asking you to potentially put yourself in jail. It is so frustrating. And I think that's, again, De Palma has a way of making you frustrated without losing your interest. That's another strength of him, is that I get really frustrated watching De Palma's movies. And I mean that in the best possible way. Because every single time he presents you with something, Blowout was like this. The Untouchables had moments of this, Mission Impossible, stuff like this. Yeah. Scarface especially, where you're like, God, why are you doing this?
Right. Why do you care about your sister so much, right?
Yeah.
Cinematographer was Stephen F. Burnham. He collaborated a lot with Brian De Palma with movies like Body Double, Raising Cain, The Untouchables,
Mission Impossible with him too.
Mission Impossible 1 and 2, and he got to start working second unit cinematography on Apocalypse Now and Black Stallion. So you got somebody who got to start out right with good movies, visual movies like Apocalypse Now and Black Stallion, and now is working Brian De Palma, and I think Stephen H. Berman is one of the most successful cinematographers. We are going to talk about Brian De Palma because he has a style, but somebody's got to be the vessel to put it on screen, and Stephen does marvelous work doing what we like about it, doing two things at once and filling up the environment.
There's one thing to ask anybody who has come from Apocalypse Now before you hire them, and that is this person still breathing? Yes. Okay, then they deserve to be involved, because anyone who survived making Apocalypse Now deserves to get work for the rest of their life. The other person I want to talk about is Patrick Doyle, who I don't think gets a ton of credit for the kind of score that he puts into this movie. Patrick Doyle is, I've known him from Rise of the Planet of the Apes, from Thor. He's done movies like running the entire gamut. This film's score is, like I said, very solemn. It's very tragic. It's not...
It's the scenes, right?
Yeah, and
it's the beats.
Plays opposite some of the more upbeat music that we're getting from the music department, in that he's letting you know, this is not going the way it should. And you're constantly reminded of that. And again, it plays really well to that opening, where we don't have the entire story of how this
very solemn,
enough. Right? Yeah. It's haunting, it's beautiful, it's very much it's funereal at times. Yeah. It's surprising.
So somebody, and I was a big fan of Brian De Palma up to the 90s, and this is it was like a hiccup to us, and because when you go see a Brian De Palma movie, you almost it's going to be a roller coaster. You're ready to get on, let's get pumped up in the energy, and here you go, and it's solemn music, and it's dread, and it's what are we doing? Yeah. I don't expect this from you. Brian De Palma considered this his best movie he ever made. Still, I don't necessarily agree with him. I think Blowout is, but or Untouchables.
Yeah, he's made so many great. The thing is, I disrespect the guy. He's made so many different kinds of movies that some of them enter that discussion for greatest of all time, and then some of them are quickly forgotten. You know, some of the stuff he's done towards lately in his career, I talk about movies like Black Dahlia, where like the movie it kind of just came out, people saw it and wanted to see it, and people don't talk about it anymore. Then you've got great films from his 80s and 90s run. I would say, I don't know if it's his best movie.
Right.
I could see him claiming it to be his masterpiece, in that a lot of people really respect when you have a seasoned director that is using every tool that he has in the best possible way. I can't argue with that this film is nearly flawless. I don't know if it's his best movie. Like,
right.
It's a tough. I mean, for a guy that made Carrie, the guy that made Untouchables, and the guy that made Mission Impossible, which is so underrated for even of the Mission Impossible movies.
I know the only criticism of Mission Impossible is there's no bad guy.
Yeah.
How do you make a movie with no bad guy? Just like The Watchmen. How do you make a movie with no bad guy? So I understand that, you know, when you make movies, and I've made movies too, that there's somehow the execution, the putting together, it's like this is going really well. This is probably the best I can do. But overall, it's not. I don't even consider it like his best movie. But you're right. There's some mechanics to like the beginning of this, the narration. This I think that's one of the few movies that he has narration in.
Mm-hmm.
But the executing of, you know, close-ups and introduction of characters and the fullness of screen, as well like the party, how he filmed the party scenes and everything, out on the lake and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see how a person makes it, says that's my best movie, but we have to look at the whole body work.
It could be the combination too of all the factors going against the making of the movie. There was a lot of elements here that, I mean, if he hadn't gotten John Leguizamo to play Benny Blanco, that could have been a strike against the movie if he got a lesser actor. If he didn't have Pacino and Sean Penn, who, even though there was tension, worked really well together. Him and Penelope Ann Miller have some pretty strong chemistry. I think they got together romantically after.
I was gonna say
so there's a lot of elements going for it, and then you have David Koepp, who his screenplay for the film, he wrote this screenplay. You know, he also had Jurassic Park released that same year. David Koepp was kind of moving pretty strongly in terms of a screenwriter. He's done films that have not done as well, Mordecai. But he's also done these really great movies, but he was constantly rewriting that script. This script, you probably couldn't find a shooting script that translates to the movie, because he was constantly reworking it. He was on set all the time working on it. Like, so many elements went towards this movie potentially being terrible.
And that's probably what, you know, we always talk about it. Every movie that even getting made is a miracle.
Yeah.
So
and being made where it's so good at the end of the day.
So good that that's a double miracle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I highly recommend seeing Carlito's Way. It's got a cult following that, and I was completely blown beyond my radar. I didn't know so many people younger than me liked this movie.
It's weird, isn't it? Because when it came out, it didn't get the greatest review. It was kind of a lukewarm kind of mix, where it's like some people liked it, some people didn't, but it was very down the middle. And only recently have you seen its Rotten Tomatoes score improve. Have you seen people? I've actually read people that retracted their original review and wrote another one, because it's just kind of worn on you a little bit more with time. I can't speak to how I would have thought about it 10 years ago, but I enjoyed it myself.
And that's one of the things. It was very harshly criticized, the movie, and a lot of people just kind of ignored it. And now it's gotten traction, which is great.
Yeah. So definitely I want to recommend Carlito's Way. Watch the actual film. I have not attempted to watch the prequel. I probably won't anytime soon, because Luis Guzman is the only person who comes back for that. But definitely the actual film itself from '93 with De Palma, I think, is fantastic. We wrote on Twitter recently our top 5 De Palma films. I would put this one in my top 5.
Okay.
Now, having seen it, I'd boot number 5 out, whichever one that was. And I put this one in the top 5 because I think it is maybe not his masterpiece in my eyes, but I can definitely see the extreme merit behind it.
Yeah, that's a strong recommendation. I've seen this many times before, and it's great. Al Pacino eats up all the scenes.
Yeah, he does, and it's great to have a lead character and an actor who can sustain our attention for as long as he can, doing a lot of the similar kind of genre that he's done in his career. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. But what do you guys think? We want to know your thoughts on Carlito's Way. This is the first episode of our De Palma theme for this month. We're going to be talking 4 De Palma films here in April. First one, of course, being Carlito's Way. We want to know your thoughts about it. Where does it stand in your De Palma ranking. We'd like to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Don't forget, too, if you're interested, check out our Blowout episode. Check out our The Fury episode. I think those are the other 2 De Palma films we've done. And let us know your thoughts on his career and this film and where its place is. And don't forget as well, you can click subscribe and you can get our episode, which is today. You can get our episode on Thursday. You can get our episodes next week. We'd love to have you join us on the journey for season 3.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Check out that Patreon too, patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm, where you can help us pick some of the themes that we've got coming out this season. Nick, where can we find you out and about?
You can find St. Paul Filmcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.
You can find all my film reviews on GoatFilmReviews.com. Be safe out there. Don't take the train if you can avoid it.
I'm Nick, and I'm going this way.